Lama da gombo jeze jambe yang la gube cha za lo gange le je jimye jinja nye da nam da rab sa be chi nye dengun chi shin kara le bam zi kanda se be zen ra ma re min tung dong la ki se be zhou zuo gun la bu jie da le zi yan la zhu jie yang de song zhu da che zhuo nian mo ni lo le ge cha zhuo zhuo zi jing ma re mi se dong la niu gu qi ni zhi zi ra zhi nam de ne da jie sa zhi ta se yuan de le zuo ge si tu gu gu Ju zha ju dan ju nie gen zhe da le mi se jiang bei yang la de zhen de ke ge ke ra we se ge da le de mo min ba ra sa ne ga dan zhen zhi xiong luo dao ba ye le zhi bo bei na wa za do zo Ge yuge nub chan san be mai ke sara dong bo la yang se cho ge nge zhu nie be ma jun ne she su cha kor do kan zhe mang be kor ke ge je su da zhu ge qing ge lam che she su so gu ru be man se de hong ge yu ge lub zhang zang be man ge sara dong bo la yang zhen cho ge nge zhu nie be ma jun ne she su cha kor do kan zhe mang be kor ke ge je su da zhu ge qing ge lam che she su so gu ru be ma se de hong ge yu ge lub zhang zang be ma ke sara dong bo la yang zhen cho ge nge zhu nie be ma jun ne she su cha kor do kan zhe mang be kor ke ge je su da qing ge la che she su so gu ru be ma se de hong be ma se de hong be gu ru 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 be ma se de hong ye wa di ye nyu du da ma gu ru zhu gu ru ne zhou wa qi jiang ma le ba te ye sa lam gu ba la shou. Okay, touch the leg to everyone. I hope everyone is doing well.
大家吉祥如意，希望大家一切都好。
So today we will be continuing from where we left off last time.
我们今天接着我们上一次讲的继续。
So we are now speaking of the differences of time. So earlier, this is the third topic. Earlier we had already completed studying the differences of the cause and the object. So now thirdly, it is the differences of time.
我们今天继续大乘皈依的4个特点的当中的第3个，就是皈依时间性的差别。之前我们讲了皈依的原因的差别，还有皈依对境的差别。
So basically what it is saying here is that it is speaking of the differences of time of taking refuge for the different practitioners, for the different Buddhist practitioners. Not just Buddhists, but also including non-Buddhists, you could say. So there's the, it speaks of the time or duration of how the worldly people take refuge. And then it also speaks of the time or duration of how the Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, which you can collectively understand as the Hinayana practitioners, how they take refuge. And then it also speaks of how the Bodhisattvas or the Mahayana practitioners take refuge and how long do they take refuge for.
这个就是说，皈依的时间性的差别以及皈依，它的长远性的差别，这是针对不同修行人，也包括非佛教徒的皈依来说的。从时间性的上，就是来分为小乘和大乘。从小乘方面就有声闻和缘觉乘，大乘就是菩萨乘。
So it says, worldly people take refuge merely until they attain some minor personal goal pertaining to the present life or to the next. Apart from that, they are ignorant of the usages as long as I live and until I reach the stage of awakening. So what it is saying here is that when worldly people take refuge, and this refers to people who are who have not taken refuge in the 3 jewels, just this. So when worldly people take refuge, and this taking refuge does not refer necessarily to the 3 jewels. It can be to the 3 jewels, but it can also be to worldly gods, to the tree gods or the hill spirits, the tree spirits or the water spirits, and that kind of type. So when they take refuge in such spirits, or even if it may be the 3 jewels, the duration for which they take refuge is not they don't take it as long as I live. When they take refuge, they don't think I will take refuge in the 3 jewels or I will take refuge in the tree spirit as long as I live. And neither do they take refuge by thinking I will take refuge until I attain enlightenment, however many lifetimes that may take. But rather, when they take refuge, it is they think that I take refuge until whenever my wishes are fulfilled, and whatever that may be, if they want to live long or if they want to become rich, if they want to attain fame, and that kind of wishes. So if whenever the wishes or goals are attained, then they stop taking refuge. It is only until their goals are attained do they take refuge.
针对世俗人的皈依，这点来说，这个皈依并不完全是指皈依3宝，有可能是皈依世间的，比如说之前提到过的世间的山神、水神、树神等等，甚至或者有些这些世俗人他们皈依3宝，但他们并不懂得，皈依是乃至生存，就是从生到死之间，或者是乃至菩提藏之间，就是直到证到佛果之间的皈依。他们的皈依是直到他们达到他们的愿望实现之前的直到他们的愿望实现之前的皈依，就比如说世俗人希望得到更多的钱财，得到更多的名闻利养为此而皈依，直到愿望实现之前而皈依。
And it says, Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas state, for as long as I live, but I do not take refuge until the state of awakening is reached. So when the Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, which are the Hinayana practitioners, or you could just collectively understand it as the Hinayana Buddhists, when they take refuge in the 3 jewels, they take refuge until they say, when they take the refuge vow, they say, for as long as I live. And when they, after that, they continue to take refuge in the 3 jewels as long as they live. So what this means is that when they die, their refuge vow also becomes expired. So they do not, it is when they take refuge in the three jewels, it is not like the Mahayana Buddhists do, because the Mahayana Buddhists take refuge in the three jewels until full enlightenment is attained. And that does not just, it is not just limited to this life, but it can be many lifetimes, many countless lifetimes, however long it takes to attain enlightenment. That is for the Mahayana, but for the Hinayana practitioners, it is just as long as they live.
针对于声闻和缘觉乘，也就是总体来说可以说是小乘的方法来说，他们皈依三宝的，他们除了乃至生存之外，他们不承认乃至菩提藏之间的皈依，也就是意思是说，他们如果死了以后，他们的皈依戒就会消失，不像大乘菩萨道的皈依是直到证悟佛果之前一直会皈依。大乘菩萨的皈依就是不只是限于今生，而是直到证悟佛果之间。
And Bodhisattvas take refuge until reaching the stage of awakening and not for other periods. So when Bodhisattvas take refuge in the three jewels, the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, they take refuge, when they take the refuge vow, when they receive it, they promise that they will take refuge until enlightenment is attained, full awakening. And after they take the refuge vow, they continue to take refuge again and again in the three jewels, and they say, I will take refuge until full enlightenment is attained. And it is not for other periods. Other periods refer to the earlier mentioned Shravaka and Pratyeka Buddhas taking refuge period, and also the period of the taking refuge of the worldly people. So it is not for those kind of periods, but rather it is like the longest period.
对于大乘菩萨道的皈依来说，大乘菩萨的皈依是直到证悟佛果之间，一直会皈依佛法僧三宝，也就是大乘菩萨会一直皈依，直到真正的证悟到了佛果。也就是说，相比起之前世俗人和小乘佛教的皈依时间的限制，并不只是限于今生，或者是只是限于世俗的皈依，而是一直生生世世中直到证悟佛果之间，一直都会皈依。
So because of this, we could understand that after the Bodhisattva passes away, or you could say dies, because when they took refuge in the three jewels, it was the duration was for until enlightenment is attained. I take refuge in the three jewels. Their refuge vow does not expire, unlike that of the Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, because theirs expires when they die.
也就可以说，大乘菩萨的修行人的话，他们死了之后，他们因为他们之前皈依三宝的决心，或者他们皈依三宝是希望直到证悟佛果之间一直皈依三宝。那也就是说，不像小乘佛教修行人，他们如果死了之后，皈依戒就会消失，因为他们的皈依只是限于今生，而大乘菩萨道的皈依会生生世世中都具有。
Then we can go to the next slide. Concerning this, some say that the words, as long as I live, do not refer to as long as this life continues, but mean as long as the mind continues to exist. And that is to say, those words is precisely to take refuge until attaining Buddhahood. So what this is saying is that, what Sakya Pandita is saying here is that some Tibetans, probably Tibetan scholars living during his own period, during his own time, and before him, would say that when we spoke of the Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddha's duration of taking refuge, which is as long as I live, when they explained what that meant, that as long as I live meant, some Tibetan scholars would explain it as, they would say that it does not refer to as long as this life continues, but rather as long as the mind continues. So as long as I live means as long as the mind continues, not as long as I live. So that is how they would explain it. So Sakya Pandita is basically saying that that is not right, what they are saying. It cannot be explained as long as the mind continues. It has to be explained as long as this life continues. Because when the Bodhisattvas take refuge, as we said earlier, it is taking refuge until full enlightenment is attained. And that is as long as mind continues, you could say. But something similar to as long as mind continues. But if you explain the Hinayana practitioner's way of taking refuge, is when they said, as long as I live, if you explain that to be as long as mind continues, then it becomes what Sakura is saying, that the Hinayana way of taking refuge and the Mahayana way of taking refuge does not become very different. It becomes kind of the same. So that is the problem, he's saying.
这里就是说，之前提到的这个乃至生存之前的皈依，乃至生存的之间的皈依的话，在藏地的有一些学者会解释说，这个乃至生存是指乃至心的生存，而不是说乃至生命的生存。但是萨迦班智达在这里指出的意思就是说，这里并不是指说心的乃至生存，而是指说是生命的乃至生存，因为。之前提到过，只有大乘菩萨道的皈依是直到证悟之间，也就是说，直到是说乃至心的生存。但是如果是之前提到的小乘佛教的话，就是说是生命的乃至生存。但如果这里根据之前藏地学者的说法，是指心的乃至生存的话，那小乘佛教的皈依和大乘佛教的皈依就没有区别了。
And he's saying this is the so-called furtive production of the thought of awakening. So what is, I guess you could understand that as Sakura saying that this type of awakening, thought of awakening is stolen from the Mahayana tradition. So he's making fun of, basically it's Sakura kind of humor. He's making fun of those Tibetan scholars because if you accept what they said, that as long as I live, when Hinayanas take refuge and they take refuge until as long as I live, if that means as long as, and it becomes the same as the Mahayana. So he's saying that the Hinayana refuge is now stolen from the Mahayana ways of taking refuge.
那如果是根据之前藏地学者所说的话，如果是这样子的话，那我们就会把这个称之为贼助心。这个贼助心萨迦班智达这里的也是一种幽默，它就是有点嘲笑之前的那个藏地学者的说法。因为这样子的话，就是如果说接受小乘佛教的皈依也是心的乃至生存的话，那就是等于把大乘佛教的皈依就是偷了过来。那因为如果说是小乘佛教的皈依也是指心的乃至生存的话，那小乘佛教的皈依就好像前面讲的和大乘佛教的皈依就没有区别。
Because he's saying that according to you Tibetan scholars, when the Hinayana practitioners take refuge in the three jewels and they say, I take refuge in the three jewels as long as I live, when you look at them, when you hear them saying that, they're saying that I take refuge until I die, whenever, until I die, until the time comes when I die. But in actuality, they are taking refuge until full enlightenment is attained. So therefore it is, so when you look at it, it is the Hinayana refuge, but in actuality, the Hinayana practitioners are taking the Mahayana refuge. So that is what Sakura is saying. So he's saying that cannot be possible. So you cannot explain as long as I live, as long as mind continues. You have to explain it as long as this life continues, or as long as this body is alive.
如果说小乘佛教的皈依由乃至心的存在的方法来解释的话，那就是等于和大乘佛教的皈依一样，就是直到证悟佛陀的果位为止的生生世世的皈依。那这样子的话，就其实是大乘佛教发心的皈依，而不是小乘佛教发心的皈依。所以这里对于小乘佛教来说，不应该说是心的乃至生存，而是说应该是指这一生，或者是说现在的这个身体的乃至生存的皈依。这样子的话，才能够区分开小乘和大乘的皈依。
Some of you might be wondering, why is all of this being mentioned? Is it really necessary for Saben to mention these different views of different scholars and traditions and the like? Well, it is important because if you look at the very title of this text, it is called Clarifying the Sage's Intent. So it is Sapen's work here. It's Sapen, short for Sakapendita. It is Sapen's work here to clarify, to elucidate the intent of Shakyamuni Buddha. Because during his time, there are many different masters, there are many different views, and each explaining the Buddha's teachings in their own way. And when Sakapendita saw that, in many cases, he saw that they are explaining it the wrong way, in the wrong way. So it is, therefore, he is clarifying here what is right and what is wrong.
那我们有些人可能会在想，为什么这里萨班也就是萨迦班智达要花这么多的时间来解释这些区别？就是有没有真的是不是有没有必要要解释那些藏地学者不同的区别啊？但是因为我们这一次学习的这个论点的书名就叫《牟尼密意显明论》，也就是说这是萨班的工作来阐明释迦牟尼佛的密意。因为当时有很多不同的学者，他们都有他们自己的方法来解释，或者是说来教佛陀的佛法。那当时的话就有很多错误的方法被传授出来，所以这里萨班就是要把释迦牟尼佛的密意解释清楚。
So because Sapen has a good understanding of what the Buddha's teachings and meaning actually is, and he notices other masters explaining it in the wrong, incorrect way, he needs to speak up. Otherwise, if he lets them continue with spreading or explaining the teachings in their own style, and it is wrong, then there's a danger that the Buddha's teachings could end up being corrupted by wrong explanations by different masters. So therefore, he is speaking up and clarifying the actual meaning of these points.
因为萨迦班智达就是非常的清楚释迦牟尼佛的密意，所以他在这里一定要把他的理解要解释清楚，不然的话如果之前的一些修行人跟着错误的方法学习的话，那佛法就会被毁坏。所以这里萨班就是要把释迦牟尼佛的密意要解释清楚。
So we go to the next slide. But if this was so, there would be no difference between the common and uncommon taking of refuge, and the vows of individual liberation, pratimoksha, and of the Bodhisattva would become a single system. So he is saying that if, as the Tibetan scholars, the way they explained, if that was the case, if you accept it just as they say, then he's explaining the problems, what problems would follow. So he is saying that Sapen is saying that there would be no difference between the common way of taking refuge and the uncommon. So common refers to the Hinayana way of taking refuge, and the uncommon taking refuge, which is the Mahayana taking refuge. And the vows of individual liberation, the pratimoksha, which is you could understand it as the Hinayana, special to the Hinayana tradition. Although the Bodhisattvas are endowed with that vows too, but it is especially belongs to the Hinayana tradition. So the Hinayana vows, the individual liberation of pratimoksha vow, you can understand that as the Hinayana vow, and the Bodhisattva vows would also become a single system. It would become one. So those are the problems.
这里就是说，根据之前讲的，就是小乘佛教和大乘佛教的，如果说是，就是我们之前解释的，如果说是一样的话，那会有什么样的问题？那这样子的话，就是共同的皈依和不共同的皈依就没有区别了。这里共同的皈依也就是指小乘佛教的皈依，不共的皈依就是指大乘佛教的皈依。如果是这样子的话，那别解脱戒和菩萨戒也是一样的别解脱戒的话，主要是指小乘佛教的戒律，虽然菩萨本身也具有别解脱戒，但是主要是指小乘佛教的戒律，然后菩萨戒的话就是指大乘佛教的戒律。如果我们之前像其他藏地学者那样说的话，那别解脱戒和菩萨戒也就没有区别了。
This would contradict the explanation in the ornament of Mahayana sutras of Mahayana refuge taking as having 4 special characteristics, and such a principle is not taught in any sutra or tantra. So what he's saying is that if you accept as what the Tibetan scholars, some Tibetan scholars have said, as earlier mentioned, if you accept it just as they have said, then it would contradict the explanation and the ornament of Mahayana Sutras, because in the ornament of Mahayana Sutras, it is a Mahayana text. In the ornament of Mahayana Sutras, when speaking of the Mahayana way of taking refuge, in that textbook, it says that the Mahayana way of taking refuge has 4 special characteristics, 4 special qualities that make it more superior than the Hinayana way of taking refuge. But according to the way you explained it, because as long as I live is supposed to be explained as, or to be understood as long as mind continues, then it contradicts what the ornament of Mahayana Sutras, what that textbook is saying.
那这也就是说，如果我们接受之前藏地学者的说法的话，那就是违背了大乘经庄严论的说法。因为大乘经庄严论的里面说了皈依有4种特点，也就是说有4种比小乘佛教更加殊胜的特点。那如果说我们接受了之前藏地学者的说法的话，那就等于就违背了经庄严论的说法。也就是说，我们之前讲的乃至生存之间的那个差别，也就是一样的了。
And so, because in the ornament of Mahayana Sutras, as I mentioned, it speaks of 4 qualities that make the Mahayana way of taking refuge superior than the Hinayana way of taking refuge. And I do not really know the 4 qualities that well because I haven't studied the ornament of Mahayana Sutras, but I think the 4 qualities might be something like the first quality that makes the Mahayana way of taking refuge superior than that of the Hinayana way of taking refuge is because when the Mahayana practitioners take refuge in the 3 jewels, they take refuge in order for sentient beings to be free from suffering. As for when Hinayana practitioners take refuge, they don't take refuge in the 3 jewels in order for sentient beings to be free from suffering, but rather they take refuge in the 3 jewels so they themselves may be free from suffering. So that is one reason why the Mahayana way of taking refuge is superior than that of the Hinayana.
房子说这里所说的大乘皈依的4种特的4种法的话，不是非常的清楚具体哪4种法，因为还没有学习大乘经庄严论。但是里面有一点可以说的话，也就是说，大乘佛教的皈依3宝是为了帮助轮回里的众生解脱而皈依的，而小乘佛教的皈依只是为了自己而皈依。
And the second quality that makes it superior than the Hinayana is because when the Mahayana practitioner takes refuge in the 3 jewels, they take refuge in order to attain the state of the Buddha. As for when the Hinayanas take refuge, as I mentioned, there are 2 Hinayana practitioners, the Shravakas and the Pradeka Buddhas. So when the Shravakas take refuge, they take refuge in order to attain the Sangha. And when the Pradeka Buddhas or the half Buddhas take refuge, they take refuge in order to attain the Dharma, but not the Buddha. So that is the second reason why it is superior.
第2点来说的话，大乘佛教的皈依是为了成佛，而小乘佛教的话，比如说声闻乘皈依是为了证得阿罗汉，也就是是为了得到僧众的果位，而圆觉乘的话是为了得到佛法，也就是为了证悟缘起。
And the third quality is that when the Mahayanas take refuge, they also, I think you could say that it is endowed with the understanding of the emptiness, the view of the no self, not being a self or identity. And that is the complete view they have. They are endowed with the complete view, while the Hinayana practitioners do not have the complete view of the not being a self or an I.
第三点来说的话，就是大乘佛教的皈依是包含了完整的见解，就是拥有无我空性的智慧，而这一点是小乘佛教所没有的。
And then the fourth quality is that the Mahayana taking refuge kind of like is always superior, naturally superior than any other type of refuge, whether it be the Hinayana, the Buddhist refuge other than itself, which is the Hinayana, and also that of the worldly type of refuge. In every aspect of, in every kind of aspect, the Mahayana is always on top, but it's better.
第四个特点来说的话，就是大乘佛教的皈依就是自然的比任何其他乘的皈依要殊胜。比如说，不管是之前提到的小乘佛教，还是人天乘的皈依，大乘佛教自然本身就具有比那些其他乘皈依的殊胜的功德。
And so therefore, it says, and in any sutra or tantra. So he's saying that what the several Tibetan scholars, such a thing has never been taught in any of the sutras or tantras. So therefore, it is not the intent of the Buddha, and it is incorrect. It is an incorrect statement of view.
这里然后继续就是说，之前藏地其他不同学者的说法的话，是在任何的经序当中都没有提到过的，都是因为对佛法的不了解的原因，然后所以说，就前面讲到的那些藏地学者的说法，不是释迦牟尼佛真正的意义，真正的意思。
For these reasons, those who maintain this possess the fault of having little religious knowledge and are taking presumptuous liberties with the doctrine. So what that means is that for the above mentioned reasons, those Tibetan scholars and anyone who says such things like that have little religious knowledge, which means they have not really carefully looked into the Buddhist textbook. They have not carefully studied the textbooks. They just, hastily, read through and then just taught whatever they wanted to. And then they are also very proud, these people, these such scholars are very proud and have little knowledge of the textbooks of the true intent of the Buddha. So therefore, what Sapan is trying to say is that there's no reason or no need to listen to what they are saying.
就是说由之前我们阐述过的那些之前阐述过那些原因综合来说的话，任何持有前面讲的藏地学者的那些见解的人的话，都是因为没有仔细学习佛法，或者是没有仔细的文思，只是草草的看了一些经文之后，就以自己的方法来理解，而且的话，有持有这样见解的话，都是贪心非常深重的原因，然后这些也不是正确的见解。
Next slide.
下一页。
So this is the fourth topic. So we just completed with the third topic, which is the differences of time. Now this is the fourth one, which is the differences of aim.
然后接下来我们说，大乘佛教皈依的第四个特点就是说是就是目的。
So worldly people take refuge merely for the purposes of this life or future lives, as you might use an escorting god. So what it's saying is that worldly people, when they take refuge, whether it be the three jewels or it be just the worldly gods, when they take refuge, it is merely for the purpose of this or future lives, which means it is merely to, for some good things to happen in this life, such as becoming rich or famous, or to attain some knowledge or something like that, or future lives. Just like speaking of the next 1 or 2 lives, but it is not like for a very long time. They're not taking refuge for a very long time. It is just to fulfill the needs or their goals in this and the future lives. And the way it is they are taking refuge is something similar to is how you would use an escorting guard. It is like if you're going from one country to another and you don't know how to travel by yourself and you're scared of traveling by yourself, then we would usually ask someone who we would know, someone who we would trust, and someone who has experience in traveling, and we would rely on them, and they would help you help you get to that place wherever you want to be. And once you get there, then you're going to part ways from that God. It's bye-bye from there. So something similar to that. When they take refuge, it is just for this or future lives, and once their needs are fulfilled, then the refuge is over.
世俗人的皈依的话，就是不管是说是皈依三宝还是皈依世间神的话，都是为了今生或者是来世的利益。比如说，希望能够更有钱，有更多的名闻利养，或者是获得更多的知识等等。但这些世俗人的皈依都不是为了长远的来皈依，就好像去请求一个护送者一样。举个例子来说，比如说我们非常害怕从现在自己在的这个国家到另外一个国家去旅行，那我们就会找一个我们信任的人，或者是有旅行经验的人带我们过去。一旦我们想到了那个国家之后，我们就会和那个人说再见，就不需要他们的护送了。同样的，世间人的皈依的话，都是想皈依一个神或者是皈依三宝但是直到他们的愿望，不管是今生还是来世的愿望达成了的话，他们就不会再皈依他们所皈依的，不管是三宝还是世间的神。
Shravakas take refuge with the desire to obtain arahatship for their own sakes. So when the Shravaka practitioners take refuge in the three jewels, it is mainly to attain arahatship, the state of arahathood for their own sakes, because they are scared of their suffering, of the sufferings of samsara. They have had enough of the sufferings of samsara. They find fault in the sufferings of samsara, and therefore they examine why am I suffering, and what is the causes of my suffering, and they understand that it is the defilements, and then they strive to attain arahatship to get rid of the suffering and the defilements.
然后对于声闻乘的来说，他们的皈依是为了他们自己证得阿罗汉的果位而皈依。然后他们是因为害怕轮回里面的痛苦，以及他们发现轮回的过患，然后他们就会去思考以及检查为什么自己会在轮回里受到这么多的痛苦，然后他们就会为了自己证得阿罗汉的果位去证悟法悟而皈依。
And Pratyeka Buddhas take refuge for their own sakes to a desire to attain gnosis, jhana, by themselves. This they do in a realm where no Buddha dwells, and to understanding dependent origination. So when the Pratyeka Buddhas, so I think this is not really to be understood as Pratyeka Buddhas itself, but those who are striving to attain Pratyeka Buddhahood. So those who are striving to attain Pratyeka Buddhahood, when they take refuge for their own sakes. It is not for all sentient beings. And they take refuge in the three jewels, and mainly the Dharma, as I mentioned earlier. And they do that so they may attain gnosis or jhana by themselves.
然后说圆觉乘的话，这里不单单是指圆觉乘，而是更多的是指希望证得圆觉果位的修行人的话，他们不是为了利益众生而皈依，他们是为了自己而皈依。他们主要是皈依法，就像我们之前讲到过的。然后他们皈依的目的也是希望能够获得智慧而皈依。
And when they finally do attain their Buddhahood, which is the Pratyeka Buddhahood, it's not the full enlightenment, but when they do attain their state of Buddha, which is the Pratyeka Buddhahood, then they attain it at a place where there's no fully enlightened Buddha, at a time when there's no fully enlightened Buddha, and in a place where there's no fully enlightened Buddha. And the way they attain it is by having a good understanding of the 12 links of interdependent origination.
圆觉城的话，他们证悟的是半佛，就是辟支佛的果位。他们证悟辟支佛的果位的时候，那个时候是没有彻底证悟的佛陀存在。然后他们是通过思考、观修以及闻思，时而缘起的法来证悟辟支佛的果位。
We go to the next slide.
我们看下一页。
The Bodhisattva takes refuge for the benefit of others through the desire to attain perfectly omniscient Buddhahood. So what this is saying is that when the Bodhisattvas take refuge in the three jewels, they take refuge in order to benefit others, in order to save all sentient beings from suffering, or to save all sentient beings from samsara.
菩萨道的皈依是为了自他人而皈依，是为了解脱，说是为了解救在轮回中受苦的众生而皈依。
And so their goal is to attain perfectly omniscient Buddhahood, which is perfect, complete enlightenment.
然后他们皈依的目的也是为了希望能够证得全知佛陀的果位而皈依。
But when you really think about it, when the Bodhisattvas take refuge, we usually say their final goal is their main goal is to attain enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. But actually, the main goal of the Bodhisattvas is to help others, to help other sentient beings. And so they have this, because they have a great compassion in their mind, in their hearts or minds. They understand the sufferings of all sentient beings, and having a good understanding that all sentient beings have been their mothers in many past lifetimes. They want to repay their kindness, and therefore they find that the best way to repay their kindness is by helping them, or to get rid of their suffering.
但是我们仔细思考的话，菩萨的皈依，确实是为了证得佛陀的果位的皈依，但是其实主要的目的或动机是为了帮助众生。因为菩萨道的皈依，他们与生俱来就有，他们与生就具有大悲心而皈依，所以他们因为知道轮回里面的痛苦以及过患，所以他们想要帮助以及回报之前所有做过自己母亲的众生，然后最好的能够帮助到之前做过。无数次做过我们自己母亲的众生的方法，就是能够帮他们从轮回中救度出来，帮他们摆脱轮回的痛苦。
So Bodhisattvas, as I mentioned, want to help all others by getting rid of their suffering, but they know that they themselves are currently incapable of getting rid of the sufferings of sentient beings, as they do not have the power to do so at the moment, when they are bodhisattvas. So they examine, they see what can they do, how can they help all sentient beings, and they come to realize that only by attaining full and complete enlightenment can they help all sentient beings, because the only person or state from which you can help or save all sentient beings is the state of full Buddhahood or complete enlightenment. So therefore, in order to help all sentient beings, they attain full enlightenment. So the main goal is to help sentient beings, and attaining enlightenment is the kind of the method to help to fulfill that goal or wish.
菩萨就是发现，如果真的想要帮助到所有的众生摆脱轮回的痛苦的话，他们经过仔细思考之后，发现现在自己也没有办法暂时摆脱轮回的痛苦，所以他们就发现，只有证得全知佛陀的果位，才能够彻底帮助到所有的众生。所以说，因为只有佛的境界才能够做到。真正的帮助众生摆脱轮回的痛苦。所以说，虽然菩萨是皈依是为了证悟佛陀的果位，但是证悟佛陀的果位只是一种方法，他们主要的目的或者说发心是为了能够帮助众生摆脱轮回的痛苦。
As it is stated in the Untitled Tantra, the three refuges are established through the excellent qualities of the teacher, the doctrine, and his disciples. taking into consideration the three vehicles and those who like to perform services to the three jewels. So what this is saying is that it is speaking of why there are three refuges.
就好像在宝训论当中说的，导师教法阿处理三者功德摄三乘，复为三种性皈依，故说三者为三宝。这里就是解释为什么有三种不同的皈依。
So it is saying that there are three vehicles. One of the reasons is why it's because there are three vehicles. Because there are three vehicles, there are three objects of taking refuge, which are the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. So the three vehicles can be understood as those who have, so basically the three vehicles are the Shavaka's vehicle, or the Shavaka's mode of practice. And then the second is the Pradeka Buddha's mode of practice. And the last one is the Mahayana or the Bodhisattva's mode of practice. So those are the three vehicles. And you could understand it as being, when we speak of vehicle, it can also be understood as the actual person, the actual practitioner. So when we speak of the Bodhisattva belongs to the Mahayana vehicle. When you speak of the practitioner of the Pradeka who wishes to attain Pradeka Buddhahood, that they belong to the Pradeka vehicle. And then the Shavaka belongs to the Shavaka vehicle.
这里说的三乘就是指不同就是指三种不同对境的皈依，是佛法僧的这个三种不同的对境的皈依。细分来说的话，就是分为这个三乘就是指声闻乘、缘觉乘和菩萨道大乘。然后这个乘的话，也可以是指修行人的意思，也就是说修行菩萨道的话，也就是大乘佛教的修行以及皈依。然后如果是修行圆觉希望能够证得圆觉果位的话，也就是圆觉乘的修行人；然后希望证得声闻阿罗汉乘的果位的话，也就是声闻阿罗汉乘的修行人。
And so how we can understand this is for those who wish to attain the Buddhahood, full enlightenment, for those practitioners who wish to attain full enlightenment, there is the Buddha, the teacher. And for those who wish to attain the Dharma, or there's the, which is the Pradeka Buddhas, those striving to become Pradeka Buddhas. Therefore, there's the Dharma, which is the doctrine. And because there are the Shavakas who wish to attain the Sangha, or to become the disciples of the Buddha, therefore there is the third refuge, which is the Sangha. So that is why there are three refuges.
之所以有三种不同的皈依，就是比如说希望证得全知佛陀的果位的话，你就是会就是大乘佛教的皈依，就是把佛陀作为自己的导师，然后希望能够获得圆觉乘的修行人的话，就是会把法作为自己的老师，然后希望证得僧众阿罗汉果位的修行人的话，也就是声闻乘的修行人，就是会把僧众作为自己的导师。
Or can also be understood as because there are three types of people who like to perform services to the three jewels. And those three are like, some people like to make offerings to the Buddha. So therefore there's the Buddha is the first refuge. And then there's some people like to have a special wish to make offerings to the Dharma. So therefore there's the Dharma. And then some people like very much love monks and nuns and like to offer their services to the monastic order and the like. So therefore,
或者也可以说，就是三种不同的人，他们有三种不同的自己欢喜供养的对境。比如说喜欢供养佛陀的话，就会就是会以就是会皈依佛。然后如果说喜欢供养法的话，就会皈依法。然后或者是喜欢供养僧众的话呢，就是会皈依僧。
we can go to the next slide.
下一页。
the rules to be observed as part of taking refuge. So this is now a new topic.
然后接下来是下一个主题就是皈依的学处或者是戒律。
So when speaking of this, these rules are to be observed after one takes refuge, and this means after taking refuge, after taking the refuge vow. So before taking the refuge vow, if you are able to follow with these rules, the yet to be mentioned rules, that is very meritorious, but mainly these rules are to be observed once one has taken the refuge vow from one's teacher.
这个皈依的学处主要是指在受皈依戒之后所讲的。如果我们没有受皈依戒之前的话，就去守持这些戒律，当然是非常的好。但是更多的是指受了皈依戒之后的。
So it says there are of two types: points to be practiced with respect to all three jewels in common, and points to be practiced with respect to each refuge individually. So what this is saying is that it speaks of two different kinds of ways, or types of observing the rules. One is by observing the rules, speaking of how to observe the rules once one has taken refuge in all the three jewels collectively. And then the second way speaks of how to take refuge, how to observe the rules once one has taken refuge in the Buddha, and then how to observe the rules once one has taken refuge in the Dharma, and how to observe the rules once one has taken refuge in the Sangha. So it speaks of individually, the second type.
这个皈依的学处有两种细分，一个是共同，一个是个别的学处。共同的学处就是在皈依佛法僧三宝之后，有哪一些一定要共同手持的戒律或者是学处。然后关于个别的学处的话，就是我们前面讲的皈依佛法僧三宝三种不同的皈依，有个别细分的不同的戒律要手持。
The general training includes both activities to be accomplished and things to be avoided. So it is speaking of, so first we're going to speak of the first type, which is the points to be practiced with respect to all three jewels in common. So to further speak of that, there are two topics. Training, so it includes the activities to be accomplished and those to be avoided. So once one has taken refuge in the three jewels, what does one need to do? And once one has taken refuge in the three jewels, what should we not do? So that is what it is going to speak of.
对于共同的要手持的戒律或者是学处来说的话，又有两个不同的细分，一个是我们应做的，另外一个是我们不应该做的。然后这个是指所有皈依佛法僧三宝的共同要手持的戒律。
So the first type, which is the first one, which is what activities should be accomplished. That further has three topics. Three activities are to be accomplished. The three are associating with noble people, studying the noble teaching, and accomplishing your activities in accord with the teaching. So there are three topics to speak of what one should do, what one needs to be accomplished once one has taken refuge in the three jewels.
然后在共同皈依三宝的我们应该要做的里面又有三个不同的细分，就是亲近圣者，然后听闻正法，然后就是如法修行，如法实修，然后这三个都是指共同皈依三宝之后应该要做的。
We can go to the next slide.
我们看下一页。
So associating with noble people, so this is the first topic. This means studying Dharma teacher. So once one has taken refuge in the three jewels, one of the things that one needs to do is associating with noble people. And there are two different kinds of noble people, but the first one is the spiritual preceptor or the spiritual teacher. And this spiritual teacher cannot be just any kind of teacher, but a genuine teacher.
我们 我们应该要做的这个3个戒律里面，第一个就是要亲近圣者，也就是说我们皈依之后要亲近圣者，然后这个圣者里面有2种，第一个就是指具德的上师，也就是说具德正法的上师。
So when we speak of the genuine spiritual teacher, what the Buddha said about the spiritual teacher, of what a genuine spiritual teacher is that a genuine spiritual teacher should be someone who is who has a good understanding of someone who can teach the Hinayana Dharma, who can teach the Mahayana Dharma, and who can also teach the Vajrayana Dharma. If there's such a teacher, that is a good, genuine religious teacher. And not just that, but someone who is endowed with good vows and who can teach the Dharma well, and also someone who is endowed with great compassion.
然后佛陀这里解释的说，具足法相的上师，就是说指可以教小乘、大乘及金刚乘法的上师，然后同时也是具有清净戒律和大悲心的上师。
So when we seek a spiritual teacher, it doesn't matter, if that teacher is a really great, renowned scholar or not. Basically, the spiritual teacher needs to be someone who is better than oneself.
我们要找具的上师的话，不一定是要一个非常著名或者非常有名的上师，但是一定要是比自己更好的一个上师。
And more importantly than understanding the teacher being able to speak the Dharma, to speak of the Dharma, is for the teacher themselves to be endowed with the practice of the Dharma. So someone who not just is good at speaking, good at teaching the Dharma, but someone who also, whatever that teacher teaches to others, that teacher should also be able to apply whatever he or she is teaching to their own lives, someone who also practices as well. So if there is such a teacher, then that is a very good teacher.
更重要的是，我们这个要寻找的具德上师是要真正具有教法的上师，也就是说，不只是说佛法，或者是不只是去教佛法，而是要自己真正具有修行，然后会把修行用在自己的实际生活上的上师。
And there's a saying that if the teacher is a scholar, then it is most likely that the student or disciple will end up as a scholar as well. And if the teacher is a good practitioner, then the student will end up as a good practitioner as well. So therefore, it is very important to, when you first examine or seek a teacher, you need to really examine them well and make the right choice in choosing your teacher.
有个说法是说，如果上师是一个学者的话，那他的弟子也会是一个学者；如果上师是一个好的修行人的话，他的弟子也会是一个好的修行人。所以我们在皈依上师之前，一定要认真、非常仔细的观察上师。
So now we are going to speak of the second type of noble people. So the first being the spiritual teacher. The second says, you should also place your trust in friends who practice in accord with the Dharma and lead all your relatives, associates, and servants to the Dharma. So what this is saying is that not just the spiritual teacher, but you should also associate yourself with good friends. And in this case, it is friends who practice the Dharma. Because the advantage of making friends with who practice the Dharma is that if you make friends with people who practice the Dharma or stay close to them, then it is most likely that you yourself will also end up practicing the Dharma well. As for if you associate yourself with bad friends, then you may, in most cases, you will end up as a bad person. For example, the way we can understand that is that if you have some people who do smoking or drinking, and if you associate with those people, if you hang around with those people for long enough, then you may end up, doing something similar to what they're doing. You may end up catching the habit of smoking or drinking. And any other kind of bad or non-virtuous thing. So therefore, if you associate yourself with good Dharma practitioners, you yourself will also become a good Dharma practitioner. So that is why one should associate with good Dharma friends.
第二种要亲近的圣者，就是指修行佛法的道友。和道友做朋友的好处就是，我们和修行好的道友在一起做朋友的话，我们自己的修行也会增上，我们自己也会好好修行。如果说我们和不好的朋友就是交往做朋友的话，那我们自己之后也会变得不好。就比如说，举个例子来说，如果我们和经常吸和喝酒的朋友交朋友的话，那时间长了，我们也会和他们一样，比如说去吸，或者是喝酒，或者是做其他不如法的事情。所以说，道友做朋友的话是，第二种我们要亲近的圣者。
And he says, and lead all your relatives, associates, and servants to the Dharma. So what that means is that once one has associated with the teacher, the spiritual, genuine spiritual teacher, and the good Dharma friends, then one needs to practice. And when everything, all of that goes well, then one needs to lead your relatives, associates, and servants, if there are any, basically anyone that is close to you, into the Dharma. You need to introduce the Dharma to them as well, because one needs to benefit them. And the way one can benefit them is by introducing them to the Dharma. And because that will help them, it helps both the body and the mind, because that is what the purpose of the Dharma. So therefore, it is saying that one should do that.
然后我们要让所有我们的亲朋眷属都能够进入佛门，也就是说，我们自己在亲近圣者之后，我们自己有了修行以后，就是要让我们的亲朋，然后如果我们有眷属的话，都要介绍他们来修行佛法，因为这样才是能够真正能够帮助到他们，因为佛法的功德就是能够让人都身心获得利益，所以我们要让亲朋好友都进入佛门学习。
Go to the next slide.
我们看下一页。
Studying the noble teaching. So this is the second topic. As I mentioned earlier, there are 3 topics. So this is the second topic.
然后我们接下来说，我们要就是共同的学出应该要做的第二个主题就是听闻正法。
So yeah, this is the second topic of when speaking of what needs to be accomplished once one has taken refuge in the 3 jewels.
这个就是我们在皈依了3宝之后，我们第二件要做的事情就是听闻正法。
So the second is studying the noble teaching. So studying the noble teaching consists of studying the 3 divisions of scriptures, the Tripitaka, also known as the 3 baskets, that were definitely taught by the Buddha, or if you have received the initiations, the 4 classes of Tantra. The 4 classes of Tantra are known as the Kriya, the Chalia, the Yoga, and the Untitled Yoga Tantra.
然后我们这里要听的正法就是指佛陀所教的3藏，就是经律论。然后如果我们有灌顶的话，就要听闻4部，就是事部、行部、瑜伽部和无上瑜伽部。
So it speaks here of both the Sutrayana and the Tantrayana. So if you're studying the Sutrayana teachings, then you need to study the 3 baskets. The 3 baskets, the Tripitaka, the 3 divisions of scriptures are also known as the 3 baskets, consists of the Abhidharma. The first one is the Abhidharma, and then one is the Sutras, and one is the Vinaya, or the monastic code.
然后这里就是以显密而分开。如果是修行显宗的话，就是要学习3藏，就是经律论。
If you are studying, if you have already received initiations or empowerments from a guru, a Vajrayana guru, then one needs to study the 4 classes of Tantra. So basically, Vajrayana practices are divided into 4 different practice modes, each being better than the other. So there are 4 classes, which is the Kriya Tantra, and the Chalia Tantra, the Yoga Tantra, and the Untitled Yoga Tantra. So there are 4 classes of Vajrayana, 4 different ways of practicing Vajrayana. So one needs to practice those if one has already received initiations.
然后如果是密宗修行人，然后有了金刚上师的灌顶的话，就是要修行4部，这个4部里面一个比一个殊胜。然后如果说有了金刚上师的灌顶的话，就要修行这4部。
Or you can study treatises that explain the intended sense of the Buddha's word, religious teachings you can trust as authentic, composed by such aryas and masters as Maitreya Natha, Asanga and his brother Vashubandhu, Nagarjuna and his spiritual son Aryadeva, Dignaga, Dharmakirti, Shantideva, and Gunaprabha. So these are Indian masters, mostly from Nalanda University in India, ancient India. Maitreya Natha is the Bodhisattva, Maitreya, I believe. So there are many scriptures that these masters have written, sort of as commentaries of the sutras or of the Abhidharma teachings of the Buddha or the Vinaya, explaining the intended meaning of the Buddha. So the Tripitaka itself, if you look at the actual words of the Buddha, sometimes it's difficult to understand it directly because it may be so profound. So the works composed by these masters elucidate it to make it more clearer and easier to understand the Buddha's teachings. So therefore, Sapin is recommending that we also study the teachings or works of these masters.
然后萨迦班智达，然后之后也就解释说，或者是说我们也要听闻就是解释佛经的论点，比如说由弥勒菩萨或者是弥勒佛所造的，由无著兄弟龙树父子、陈那法称、祭天菩萨以及功德光等大德们所铸造的可靠的论点，这些都是以前纳兰达寺的大德们，然后他们的论点都是详细的解释了佛陀的意义，所以就是要修行他们所铸造的论点。
I'm not sure if all of these the works composed by these masters are available in Chinese and English, but several are. Several well-known, such as the Way of the Bodhisattva, which was composed by Shantideva. That is a very well-known work that is very essential for Mahayana practitioners to study. And also the works by Nagarjuna, such as A Letter to a Friend that he composed. Those are also good and quite easy to understand. So it is good if one can read such books when one has the time to.
然后不是很清楚这一些所有的这些大德们的论点都被一一的翻译，但是如果可以的话，就是一定要修行入行论，然后一定要修行亲友术。
You can go to the next slide.
让我们看下一页。
Also, when learning the mantra teachings, you should study treatises that of authentic origin, such as the 3 commentaries composed by the Bodhisattvas, the 7 works on accomplishment composed by adepts, Siddha, and the treatise composed by such realized teachers as the Lord of Yoga, Master Virupa, King Indrabuddhi, and Vajrayana. So earlier, when we mentioned of those Indian masters, it mainly refers to the Sutrayana works that they have composed. So this is speaking if one wishes to study the Vajrayana works, just studying the Tantras taught by the Buddha itself may be difficult to understand. So there are these commentaries or works by these Vajrayana masters who have, which make it easier to understand the Buddha's Tantras. So we should study these.
我们之前刚刚上一页提到的那一些大德以及他们的著作，都是指显宗的著作，或者是指显宗的修行。然后这里是指的是密乘的大德们他们的论点、他们的著作。这些论点的话，就是能够更加容易的、更加清楚的让我们能够理解佛陀密乘的教法。
And I do not know too well of these Vajrayana works, but from the notes that I've taken from when I myself received this clarifying the sage's intent from my own teacher, Kenshin Sonam Gyatso Rinpoche, the 3 commentaries refer to, the first is, it says the 3 commentaries composed by the Bodhisattvas. So there are 3 Bodhisattvas and there are 3 commentaries. So one is, I believe, was Vajrapani. One of the Bodhisattvas is Vajrapani. And Vajrapani wrote a commentary on the deity known as Chakrasamvara.
然后法王子说，这里不是非常的清楚这一些密宗的论点，但是根据之前法王子自己学习的时候，他的笔记来说的话，比如说这个三种菩提的心识，就是有3个菩萨，他们以及他们分别的解释这个密乘的教法。
And one of the Bodhisattvas is called Dorjin Ningbo, I believe. Maybe it would be translated as Vajragarbha. And so this master wrote a commentary on He Vajra, the deity He Vajra, I believe. So that is the second work.
然后法王子这里解释了3位菩萨的名字，我这里不是很清楚。然后他们解释了3个论点，然后第2个的话应该是解释了大黑天。
And then the third Bodhisattva might be Jiresik or Avalokiteshvara, but I'm not quite sure. But anyway, this Bodhisattva wrote a commentary on, taught of a commentary on Kala Chakra. So that is the third work.
然后第3个菩萨的话就是观世音菩萨所解释的论点，法王子刚才讲的那个名字我也不是很确定，之后找到的话再和师兄们说。
And then there are 7 works on accomplishment composed by adepts. So just to briefly speak of the works, I took notes, but I do not know exactly how to translate them into English. So I'll just, for those that I can, I will mention. The first work is composed by a master who could probably be, whose name could probably be translated as limbless Vajra, the Vajra without limbs, Yanla Mebe Dorje, Lebun Yanla Mebe Dorje. So limbless Vajra. And it's a work about the method and wisdom.
补充说一下，刚才讲的这个3种菩提心识的话，就是分别是金刚手菩萨所解释的胜乐序，以及金刚心髓所解释的喜金刚，以及观世音菩萨解释的十轮。然后刚才法王子又仔细讲了成就7部的细分，我也找一下，然后之后再和师兄们翻译。
The second work is by Acharya Pema Vajra. We call Lobun Pema Benza. So Acharya Pema Vajra, and he composed a work which is probably known as Accomplishment of Secrets.
然后法王子就是还在解释这个成就7部里面的第2部，然后我先找一下，然后之后再和师兄们解释。
The third work is by King Indra Buddhi, and he wrote a work called Accomplishment of Gnosis.
So, Rinpoche, would you mind explaining them all as I'm slowly finding the explanation of each one?
It's basically the title of the works. So it's not really important, I think, for many of you who are beginners to know about this, but just because since I'm speaking of explaining this teaching, I just need to roughly explain. But the first one was composed by the master known as Limbless Vajra, and it is a work about, the title of the work is, I don't know what Tenlawapa would be translated, but anyway, it is a work about method and wisdom.
对，我刚才和法王子解释，我非常不好意思，我不是很清楚这一些成就7部里面的细分。然后法王子说，这7部就主要就是解释了这个著作的名字，然后它里面的一些细分。然后第1个的话就是主要是讲了佛法的修行以及不同的方法。
The title of the second work is Accomplishment of Secrets. The author is Pema Vajra.
然后第二个的话就是解释了佛陀修行的窍诀。
The third work is called Accomplishment of Gnosis, and the author is King Indrabhuti.
然后第三个是指是解释了如何获得智慧。
The fourth work is called the suchness of clarifying Dharma, I guess you could say, and it is composed by. I took a notice. It says Matsinti. I'm not sure if I took the notice right, but Matsinti.
Sorry, the suchness of.
The suchness of clarifying the. It's difficult to translate this title, but anyway, I'm not sure. So we say maybe you could translate something like clarifying the Dharma.
OK， 补充前面说的法王子解释的每一步，然后第一个就是上师无量金刚解释的智慧和方便，第二个是莲花金刚解释的秘密成就，第三个是因扎布地王的解释的成就解释，然后之后一个是解释获得智慧的方法。
So yeah, just the fifth is known as compilement of the nature of the compilement of suchness, and that is composed by Geta Ripa. The compilement of the suchness, and it is it's not really important, but it is a tradition for the teacher to explain, to not jump over certain topics. So if I just thought of roughly just going to with the names of the treaties. So the author is Geta Ripa, and the work is compilement of suchness.
然后第五个的话就是宣说决定真如经。
And okay, then if maybe it's difficult, we can just go with the author. So the work of the sixth work was composed by a master known as Dombi Heruka.
然后因为法王子他要解释这7个的话，就是因为如果是讲法的话，就是每一个都要介绍到。然后第6个的论点的话，就是法王子刚才讲的那个名字，然后我找一下那个翻译是什么。
So the 7th work is composed by Lamo Balchenpo. So that is the author's name. So there's 7 works that if one has received the Vajrayana teaching, the initiations, one can study those.
好，然后补充前面说一下，第5个成就者是嘎达里巴，然后第6个作者是东比黑鲁嘎，然后第7个作者是拉莫巴千波。
And so it says also one should study works by masters such as Master Virupa. Virupa is an important master in the Sakya tradition, especially of the Lamdre cycle of teachings.
Sorry, I'm not sure exactly how to.
So we Sakyas have a special cycle of teachings known as the Lamdre. It is our most important teaching or practice. It is called the Lamdre. And it comes from this master, Master Virupa. So just as Naropa is like the main master of the Kagyupas, and Guru Rinpoche is like the main master from most of which the Nyingma practices come from. Like that, for us Sakyappas, it comes from Master Virupa, so he is very important.
OK， 然后刚才法王子讲的是，就是萨迦派非常重要的一个叫毗瓦巴的一个修行，的一个道果法。
And then there's also King Indrabuddhi and Vajraganta, so those are also masters whose works we can study from.
然后还有就是，就屏幕上显示的就是国王恩扎菩提多以吉巴为大德的论点。
We can go to the next slide.
好，我们看下一页。
That the Buddha proclaimed, that the compilers gathered together, that the perfected adepts realized to meditative practice, that the great scholars expounded, that the translators translated, and that is well known among scholars is the doctrine of the Buddha. So you should study, teach, cultivate through meditation, and practically achieve this. So what he's saying is that any kind of teaching, as long as it is it was proclaimed. Compilers, there are different compilers, like for the Hinayana practices, the main compiler is the monk known as the Buddha's disciple known as Kasyapa, and then Mahakasyapa, and then for the Vajrayana teachings, the main compiler is Bodhisattva Vajrapani. So teachings, if it's the Hinayana teachings, it has to be compiled by Mahakasyapa. If it is the Vajrayana teachings, it has to be something that is compiled by Vajrapani.
然后就是总体来说的话，就是这里佛陀所教的教法，就是要由进阶者来结集，然后要成就者来观修翻智达宣讲，以导师来翻译。然后对于小乘佛教的来说的话，这个进阶者和大乘佛教的进阶者都是有不同的名字。
And something that also meditated as a topic of meditation for the adepts or the realized masters, something that they meditate upon, and also something that the great scholars teach, and something that has been translated by the translators. And this refers to the Tibetan, for us Tibetans, especially because if it's in India, it does not need to be something that has been translated because it's already in Indian language. But for Tibetans, for it to be an authentic Dharma, it needs to have the above mentioned qualities, but also something that has been translated by the great translators, the Indian or Tibetan translators into Tibetan language. And it can be any other language, English, Chinese, and anything like that. And something that is well known among the scholars is the doctrine of the Buddha. And so it is saying that this is whatever has all of these above mentioned characteristics, I guess you could say, is the true doctrine of the Buddha. And that you should study it you should study it yourself, you should teach to others, you should meditate on it, and you should achieve the meaning, its intended meaning.
然后佛陀的教法也是必须要有意识来翻译，就比如说是从印度传来的经典，如果在藏地学习的话，就必须要翻译成藏文，或者是说其他我们可以来学习的语言，不管是英文还是中文。然后就是剧读具足之前所讲过的那一些佛法的功德的那些教法的话，我们就要自己来学习，然后自己学习修行之后，也要来教别人学习修行最终就是自己要获得或者是证得教法里面的内容。
And we go to the next slide.
然后我们看下一页。
If you come upon a religious teaching that is different from this, even if it seems very profound, it is not suitable to be learned, taught, meditated quantitatively cultivated or accomplished, for it is not the doctrine of the Buddha. So it is saying that if you come across any kind of teachings or qualities, if it was not taught by the Buddha, not compiled by the compilers, not translated by the translators, not meditated by the great masters, not taught by the scholars, then it is not the true Dharma. It is most likely a false Dharma.
然后接下来说的话就是，如果有再深深的佛法的话，但是如果不是由佛陀的教师，不是由集结者集结，然后成就者观修，班智达宣讲，然后一时来翻译的话，那再深深的佛法也不能自己去学习观修。
Seemingly very excellent teachings are also possessed by the non-Buddhist Indian sectarians, Tipika or Tritanka, and by other erroneous religious traditions. But since these are not the Buddha's doctrine, cast them aside and abandon them. So it's saying that even, there are some teachings that sound very nice, sound very, captivating, I guess. There are, Christianity teaches of loving kindness and compassion. Even such topics are taught by the non-Buddhist Indian schools of the past and the like. But because they're not the teachings of the Buddha, for a Buddhist practitioner, we do not need those teachings, even if they may sound nice. And since we are sure that they are not taught by the Buddha and does not have all the above mentioned qualities, then we do not need to practice them. We do not need to study them. We do not need to look at them. We can just ignore them and just cast them aside and stick with the teachings, the pure teachings of the Buddha.
如果是一些外道的教法，或者是一些邪教的教法的话，就他们可能会听起来非常的好，或者听起来非常的诱人，但是就比如说像基督教的话，也会教要有爱心，或者是要去关心别人，或者是其他一些非佛教的印度教的话，也会教一些非常好的一些内容，但是因为他们不是佛陀的教法，我们就不用去理会，也不用去看，不用修行，不用去学习，只要我们学习佛陀所教的教法就可以。
We can just continue a little bit more, I think. So we have accomplishing your activities in accord with the teaching has two aspects. So this is a new topic. There are two aspects to accomplishing your activities in accord with the teaching. First is in general, to act in conformity with the three divisions of scripture. And second is in particular, the way of accomplishing immediate activities. So we will speak of the first one and then maybe leave it there.
然后就接下来的第三种我们应该要做的事情就是如法的实修，然后这个也分为具体的两种，一个是就是总体符合的三藏，然后第二个就是如何分别暂时的修行，然后我们现在就先再讲一下总体符合的三藏如何的实修。
Next slide. In general, your deportment should accord with the Vinaya. Your meditation should accord with the sutras. Your expositions should accord with the Abhidharma. And your practice of the mantra tradition should accord with the Tantras. So what it's saying is that once you have taken refuge, this is of course something that you need to do. Once you have taken refuge in the three jewels, is that your actions, whether it be when it comes to controlling your body and speech, the actions of the body and speech should be in accord with the Vinaya teachings that were taught by the Buddha. And when you meditate, it should be in accord with the sutras, because it is saying that it should be your body and speech actions should be in accord with the Vinaya, because in the Vinaya, the Buddha speaks or puts a strong emphasis on the practices of controlling one's body and speech. So therefore, if once one has taken refuge in the three jewels, one needs to, one's body and speech and the actions of the body and speech should be in accord with the Vinaya, not something that goes against the Vinaya.
这里就是我们 讲我们如果皈依三宝之后的话，我们必须行为要符合律藏，然后观修要符合经藏，然后讲解要符合论藏，然后这个里面的律藏就是指皈依之后的话，我们的身口意三门都要非常的符合，就是不能违背律藏，就是不能违背戒律，然后我们的打坐实修的话，就是要符合经藏。
And your meditation should accord with the sutras. And the reason why it should be accorded with the sutras is because in the sutras, a lot of the meditative concentration are mentioned in the sutras. A lot of methods on the meditative concentration. So therefore, it needs to, when you meditate, it should be in accord with the sutras and nothing that goes against the sutras.
然后我们打坐要根据经藏，是因为在经文里面有很多不同修行打坐的方法，所以我们就是要根据就是要符合经藏来打坐。
And your expositions should accord with the Abhidharma. So when you teach the Dharma to others, it should be in accord with the Abhidharma. I think it is because the Abhidharma speaks a lot about the wisdom and the aspects, I believe.
然后，如果以后我们要讲解佛法的话，就是要符合论点来讲解因为在论点当中就是解释了很多智慧，然后所以就是我们要在讲解佛法的时候要根据论点来讲解。
And your practice of the mantra and your practice of the mantra tradition should accord with the tantras. When you practice the mantra tradition, basically means when you practice the Vajrayana practices, it should be in accord with the tantras. Tantras are basically taught by the Buddha himself. However, the difference between sutras and tantras is that when the sutras were taught by the Buddha as we know him in the form of, in his monk's form. However, when he taught the tantras, the Buddha transformed himself into the form of the Buddha Vajradhara, which is the blue Buddha that we see with a lot of ornaments and with both of his hands together crossed on his heart with the Vajra and bell in both hands. So the Buddha transformed himself into that form known as Buddha Vajradhara and taught the teachings. So the teachings that he taught in that form are known as Tantras, and those are Vajrayana teachings.
然后就是说，我们，密法的修行要符合序部，然后这里的序部就是指佛陀所教的佛法，然后之前也讲过，就是如果是显宗的教法的话，也是佛陀所教，但是当时的这个显宗的教法是佛陀以僧众的形象来教授的佛法，但是之后密宗序部的教法的话，是佛陀就是转生为一个蓝色的菩萨，应该是金刚手菩萨，我找一下具体的名字，然后以那个形象来传授的序部的教法。
And for those who have already received empowerments and would like to know about the tantras, I probably am not allowed to go into too much detail about the tantras, but as I mentioned, there are 4 classes of tantras. So the Kriya, the Chalia, the Yoga, and the Anuttara Yoga Tantra. So I will just briefly speak about what each of them means.
然后这里所讲的序部就是我们之前所讲过的4部，然后这里就不再会具体仔细的讲，但是会大概的介绍一下。
So basically, all 4 are practice modes of Vajrayana, but each is better than the other. So the lowest kind of, you could say the lowest is you could say the first mode of practice is the Kriya Tantra. So the Kriya Tantra, the way you could understand it is that when you practice the Kriya Tantra, one visualizes oneself as a very, not as any kind of enlightened being or a god, but rather as just an ordinary human being, something similar to a servant. And then one in front of oneself there is the deity. It can be Avalokiteshvara or Manjushri or Tara, such deities. And they are better than oneself. And they are like the king, and one is like the servant. So they are better, one is, just a little poorer than them. And from them, one receives the blessings, the attainments, just like the subjects receive gifts from the king. So that kind of way of practicing Vajrayana is the Kriya Tantra.
简单解释一下这个4步里面的第一个士步的话，就是把我们自己观想成一个世俗人，或者把我们自己观想成一个仆人，然后面前观想佛菩萨，比如说像观世音菩萨或者像文殊菩萨等等，然后就是把他们看作像国王一样，然后把自己看作仆人，然后就获得佛菩萨的加持。
And then the second type is Chalia Tantra. So Chalia Tantra is the way one practices that is oneself visualizes oneself. Unlike earlier, we visualized oneself as a ordinary being, like a servant, but this time we visualize ourselves as a god, or as the deity, you could say the Buddha. And then you could say a god. And then one visualizes in front of oneself the deity, the actual deity, or the Buddha, and both of us are like, both oneself and the deity are like friends. Both deities are like friends, and it is one receives the blessings from them. So it's like receiving a gift from one's friend. Earlier it was like a servant receiving a gift from a king, a gift from the higher to the lower. But now this time it is like receiving a gift from a friend.
那接下来讲这个行部的观修的话，就是把自己观修成一个神，然后面前也是观修不同的佛菩萨，然后我们观想这个佛菩萨和我们的关系，就是不像之前是国王和仆人的关系，而是像朋友之间的关系，然后获得佛菩萨的加持，就不像之前是观想像国王一样给仆人一个礼物，现在是观想朋友给我们一个礼物。
So yoga, Chalia Tantra is higher than Kriya Tantra. The practice mode is more superior. Now, Yoga Tantra is superior than Chalia Tantra. So Yoga Tantra, the way one practices Yoga Tantra is one visualizes oneself as the god. One generates the body of the god, of the deity. One generates the body of the deity. Then one invites the mind of the deity to take control of, to enter into the body of the deity, and then one becomes the deity with both mind of the deity and the body and the deity together connected. And then once one has received all the blessings from the deity, from the mind of the deity, then one parts ways from the mind of the deity. One is kind of like bids farewell to the mind of the deity. So it's like saying, I thank you for the gifts, thank you for the blessings, you may now return to your place. So that kind of way of practicing is the Yoga Tantra.
然后接下来说瑜伽部的观修，之前说的我们解释的行部是比事部的观修更加要殊胜，然后现在讲的瑜伽部比之前讲的行部要更加殊胜。这个的观修就是把我们自己的身体观想之后，就是请主尊进入我们的身体，然后获得了礼物或者是获得了加持之后，我们就就和我们所观修的主尊说再见，然后就不用再观修他们在我们的面前。
And finally, we have Untitled Tantra, which is the highest Tantra. And for that, we have the deities like Vajra or Kala Chakra, Chakra Samvara, many deities. And the way we practice that is that it's similar to the Yoga Tantra in most cases. One generates the body of the deity, one invites the mind, the Jnana Sattva, or the wisdom body of the deity to enter into the body of the deity, and then one becomes the deity itself, and one receives all the blessings. But at the end, we do not bid farewell to the deity. After we have received all the blessings and we finish the practices, whatever one does after that, whether one walks, one goes, wherever one goes, whatever one sees, we understand it to be all to be the appearance of the deity, and in that pride of being the deity, one rests.
然后最后就是说，无上瑜伽部的观修，就是帮我们观修我们自己的神识进入我们所观修的主尊，然后获得全部的加持。就不管是我们观修的是行金刚也好，其他的主尊，然后获得了全部的加持之后，不像之前的瑜伽部的观修会和我们所观修的主尊说再见，但是我们是观修了，我们获得全部的加持之后的话。就是我们就一直就是处于这个状态，然后不管是闻思修行还是行住坐卧，都观想一切都是主尊的显现。
So, for example, many of the well-known Buddhas that such as Avalokiteshvara, Manjushri, Tara, and the like are the Vajrayana practices based on those deities belong to the Kriya Tantra in most cases. Although some practices of those do belong to other classes of tantras, but in most cases, it belongs to the Kriya Tantra, the first tantra that I mentioned.
然后我们比如说在观修不同的佛菩萨或者是主尊的话，我们比如说如果就关于事部的话，主要是观修像观世音菩萨、文殊菩萨，还有还有度母这些当然这些佛菩萨有些也会在其他部的观修里面会用到，但是主要是在事部的观修里面观修这些佛菩萨。
And then there's also Chalia classes of Tantra. There are deities for that. Then there's the Yoga Tantra. Just today in Sakya Center in India, His Holiness the 41st Sakya Teacher Rinpoche and His Holiness the 42nd Sakya Teacher Rinpoche, along with the monks, conducted a puja for all of the deceased people due to the COVID-19, and mainly for His Holiness the 42nd Sakya Teacher Rinpoche's own personal tutor, who recently passed away. So they conduct His Holiness's, their Holiness's, and the monks conducted a puja, which we call Gunrik. It is a special puja that we Sakyapas do, and it is known as the Mahaverochana puja, and that puja belongs to the Yoga Tantra.
比如说，然后在行部和事部还有无上瑜伽部的话，也有不同的主尊来观修。就举个例子来说，今天在印度的萨迦寺里面，就第41世法王还有第42世法王，他们就进行了大日如来的超度，就是为了这一次新型冠状病毒疫情过世的所有的亡灵的超度。然后他们观修的这些主尊的话，就是比如说是瑜伽部里面所观修的主尊，然后这一次的超度也主要是为了第41世法王他的一位上师的最近的圆寂而进行的超度。
And then there's the deities such as He Vajra, Vajrakilaya, Vajrayogini, Chakra Samvara, Kala Chakra, and the like. Many deities, Aguya Samaja, Vajra Berafe, there are many deities. Those all belong to the Anuttara Yoga Tantra, the highest class of Tantra. The way one can recognize in most cases the deities, not all, but many deities who where they are both father and mother coupled together, those deities belong to the highest Tantra, the Anuttara Yoga Tantra.
然后关于像瑜伽部他们所观修的主尊的话，就有包括行金刚等等的一些主尊的观修和之前讲的事部和行部是不一样的。然后不好意思更正一下，前面讲的超度是主要是为了42任法王的亲教师的超度。
So if we continue here, it says, nowadays here in Tibet, there are many Buddhists who do not accord with the 3 divisions of scripture and who go against the 4 classes of Tantra. And yet they are marveled at by the credulous. I cannot make out what is so marvelous about them. So at the end, there's something kind of like Sapen's humor again, sense of humor. But anyway, he's saying that nowadays here in Tibet, which is during his time, in Tibet, there are many Buddhists who, when they speak or meditate or teach, they just does not go in accord with the 3 divisions of scriptures, the Tripitaka or the 3 baskets. And if it's Sutrayana, it does not go. They do not seem to go. The actions do not seem to go in accord with the three divisions of scripture. If it's Vajrayana, when it comes to Vajrayana, some of these masters, the actions do not seem to go in accord with the 4 classes of Tantra, and yet they are marveled by many, and praised by many other scholars, and that kind of. So Sabin is saying that he's seeing a lot of he's seeing something like this kind of situation during his own time, but he cannot. He's saying that I cannot make out what is so marvelous about them. I cannot see what is so special about them, because whatever they're doing, they seem to be going against the scriptures and the Tantras. So Sabin is saying that basically what we can learn from this is that if you see anyone that if the actions go against the Tantras, or scriptures, if it's about Sutrayana, if it goes against scriptures, and if it comes to the Vajrayana, if it goes against the Tantras, then it is not authentic Dharma.
然后这个萨迦班智达就是说，现在在藏地有很多行为就是不符合三藏，然后违背四须部的奇怪的修行人，然后不知道他们在做什么。然后这里法王子说，就还是萨班那种幽默，就是那一些被很多人所尊敬，或者是觉得非常具德的那些西藏的那些学者的话，他们的行为也不符合律藏，然后观修也不符合经藏讲解，不符合论点，包括他们的密法的修行也是和四部相违背的，就是和真正的修行人应该做的都不一样，所以就是这萨班就是也是一种幽默，然后说不知道他们为什么会受这么多人得到的尊敬。
Okay, we will leave it here for today.
好，我们今天讲到这里。
The next classes, there will be mentions about continuing with the rules to be observed of taking refuge once one has taken refuge, but it will speak about, there'll be mentions about once one has taken refuge, what should one do when one sleeps? What should one do when one wakes up from one's sleep? How should we eat? How should we share the food with the spirits or non-human beings, or the protectors, or how do we make offerings to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas? And then also, of course, once one has taken refuge in the Buddha, what should one do? What should one not do? And same for the Dharma and the Sangha.
我们下一节课的话就会讲，就是皈依之后一些具体的一些戒律或者一些学处，就比如说，平时生活当中应该具体怎么样做，比如说走路的时候如何观想，然后睡觉就是行住坐卧一切都如何观想，然后包括如何做上供下施等一些具体的一些教法，这是我们下一节课会讲的内容。So there is a question for Rinpoche that wonders if there's such a saying that if we read sorry, hold on. If we read mantras and such in Tibetan, we'll have greater blessings than, say, reading it in Mandarin also.
Mantras you mean having the Sanskrit mantras translated into Mandarin?
Read, so for example, read sadhana and text in Tibetan.
Oh, just textbooks, generally speaking. If it's just textbooks, yes, Tibetan or Chinese, it doesn't really matter as long as it's correctly translated.
就法王子说，就是只要翻译正确的话，就是也没有很大的区别。
I mean, if you can think about Tibetan itself, Tibetan isn't the first language that all of these teachings of the Buddha were available in. It was Indian, you could say Sanskrit or Pali, and then Tibetan, it was translated from those languages to Tibetan. So I do not see why not other languages can also be, why it cannot be, why it would have less blessings if you read it in other languages.
然后反文子说，就是就算是藏文的话，也是由之前的巴利文翻译过来的，所以就是用其他的翻译过来的语言读也没有关系。And same goes for the rituals. If one were to recite it in Tibetan or translated language, um, the amount of blessing one will attain is still the same if one were to recite the rituals in Tibetan or in the translated language.
Yes. Well, first of all, I believe that it should be okay. I don't really think there's a problem with that if the verses of the rituals are translated into Chinese or any other language. However, still, we do see in many centers where the Tibetan texts or rituals are, we make the Chinese students or any other, students of any country recited in the Tibetan, in accord with the Tibetan way. So when the Tibetan chant master chants the ritual, then everyone, whether you're Tibetan or not, everyone is reciting in Tibetan because there's the Tibetan transliterations. I believe we make them do that maybe because the Tibetan itself, we wouldn't say it's holy in its own way, but many Tibetans, having relied on the Tibetan textbooks and Tibetan practices, have attained great accomplishments. So therefore, we are very sure that the Tibetan translations are reliable. So that is why. But as long as it is correctly translated in any other language, that should be okay. But the mantras, the Sanskrit mantras, should not be translated in the meaning of the mantras should not be translated. I think it is best if the mantras be left as it is.
就刚才又补充问了一下，如果是仪轨的话，用藏音念还是用其他翻译过来的语言念更好？然后法王子说，就是就比如说很多时候开法会的话，那些法本都是有直接的音译，就是从藏语然后写成中文的文字，然后就是这样子念诵，也不是说藏文有特别哪些殊胜的地方，而是说就是藏文的仪轨就是非常的可靠，然后我们可以就直接念那些音译。但是如果说是特别的咒语的话，就是还是最好是就是念藏音。
Because when the Tibetan rituals themselves were translated from the Indian or Sanskrit rituals, I guess you could say, all the words were translated into Tibetan, but the mantras were left as it was. The pronunciation is same. When we recite, for example, Tibetans recite Om Arapadzanadi or Om Mani Padme Hum. Those are actually how it was recited in ancient India itself. So likewise, if you wish to recite a Chinese ritual that has been translated into Chinese from the Sanskrit or Tibetan, the words could be translated, the meaning, and can be recited in Chinese, but the mantras should be left as they are.
然后就补充说到，就是就算是藏地的那些仪轨的话，也是由巴利文等翻译过来的，但是咒语的话是不翻译的。就比如说我们念的文殊心咒等等都是不翻译的。最一开始在古印度的时候，那些就是佛菩萨的咒语也是那样子念诵的。所以说我们念仪轨的话，可以就是念音译或者是念翻译过来，但是咒语本身还是要根据咒语本身的音来念诵。And there is another question that wonders if the Tibetan way of making a full body posture has any difference to the full body postures that one conducts in other parts of in China or in the Han region, and one wonders if it is necessary to make the full body length of prostration for the preliminary practices.
I'm not too aware of the different styles of the body posture of other countries. However, I can say for sure that it is very, very good when you do preliminary practices to do the full length body prostration. There are its reasons. It has its reasons, such as like whatever space you cover when you do the full body prostration, all of the dust in that. I do not exactly remember, but all of the dust or something like that. The amount of dust or whatever that you cover when you're doing the full body prostrations in the future, there'll be just is like the same amount of Buddha fields that probably when one can travel to or one can manifest and the like. There are many, it has its own explanations and reasons why to do it. And yes, it is very important. And I'm pretty sure it is the same, it has the same benefits as the Chinese way of doing it.
And is it necessary that one needs to practice the full body length of prostration during the preliminary practices?
Yes, I believe it is so. It is quite necessary to do that. Usually when we just prostrate, if it's in a temple or if one meets one's guru, or if it's, when we prostrate, for the Tibetans, we don't do the full prostration, but the time that we do the full prostration is mostly when we are doing the preliminary practices. So that is the time when we do it mostly.
房子说不是很确定，就是藏地的磕大头和汉地的磕大头有什么很大的区别？应该是没有很大的区别。然后磕大头有很多很殊胜的含义。举一个简单的例子来说，比如说有一种说法就是我们在磕大头的时候，我们身体所接触到的灰尘的数量都是以后我们能够去往以及我们能够前往的佛的刹土的数量。然后关于修家行是否必须要磕大头，是的。然后在藏地的话，比如说我们去寺庙或者是去见上师的时候，一般不会磕大头，一般就只会磕头。然后但是磕大头的话是修家行的时候必须会磕大头。
Because when we do preliminary practice, one of the parts of preliminary is to purify the negative deeds, which will obstruct us from practicing the higher Vajrayana teachings, practices. So therefore, when we do the prostrations, we are able to purify a lot of the bad misdeeds. So that is why it is important to do it during the preliminary practices.
那法王再补充说到，就是修家行磕大头的话非常的重要，然后也是因为磕大头的话可以帮我们就是清净很多的罪障，然后清除很多修行的违缘，所以修家行磕大头是必须，然后也是非常的重要的。There's a question that wonders, is a refuge name important, and if one has full faith in the three rules but has not taken a refuge ritual or given a refuge name, is it something that it's important to have a refuge name?
Well, speaking about the importance of receiving a refuge name, usually we say that when you take refuge, there are benefits. There are, of course, benefits. It will be mentioned later on, but one of the benefits of by taking refuge is you receive a new name, a refuge, a Dharma name. So it is like it's customary for the teacher to bestow upon the new Dharma practitioner a refuge name. So it is like a part of the ritual, I guess you could say. It is like a new start, because once one is born, we receive a name given by our parents or someone that is important to us. They give us a new name, and that becomes like the start of our new life. Anyway, something like that. Because when we take refuge, it is like the start of a new life of a Dharma practitioner. So therefore, you receive a new name. So therefore, it is quite important. Yes.
刚才那个问题是说，就是 皈依之后拥有一个皈依的法名是不是很重要？然后法王子说，这个是皈依仪轨当中的一部分，就是我们皈依了之后，上师会会给我们一个法名，所以说这之后我们之后也会讲到，然后这个确实是比较重要的一部分。And there's another question that wonders if we can explain clearly each deity of the sorry. Yeah, so there's another question if we can clearly explain other deities' name, but that's my sincere apologies that I don't know the exact name, and hopefully later on when we have the transcription, we'll be able to provide everyone the actual name clearly. 就是刚才有个问题说，就是能不能再就是具体的解释一下每一部观修的本尊的名字，然后就是真的非常抱歉，我不是很清楚这个每一个本尊的名字，然后希望之后有了录制下来的法本之后，会再仔细的给大家做翻译。And the other question is that wonders now with the second wave of COVID-19. One feels very unsafe and feels rather scared and wonders, besides putting on a mask and taking precautionary actions, what else can we do to protect ourselves?
Well, I do not know too well because I'm not a health expert, but anyway, yeah, it's just stay at home as much as you can. Try to go out as least as you can. Try to, unless it's really necessary. Stay clean. But yeah, if it's about in the Dharma perspective, then there's some advice. But other than that, we need to just believe what the health experts are saying mostly, and whatever they recommend to do, we should follow that.
然后刚才的问题就是问，第二波疫情来临，就除了自己防护，还能怎么样做保护？然后法王子说他自己也不是医护人员，然后就是最好的建议就是听从医护人员的建议，然后待在家里，做好防护。And there is another question that wonders, will you be guiding us for our preliminary practices by any chance?
I do not really have any plans to do that yet. Maybe someday. Right now the plan is just to go to clarifying the sage's intent as much as we can. We may possibly skip some parts if they are too difficult to understand. But whatever is in our reach of understanding, I will speak of that. And then after this, we will see there are many other books that I thought of teaching. I did think of teaching actually, or maybe the 37 practices of a Bodhisattva. But then because I heard that there are many beginners here, I chose to teach this clarifying the sage's intent because there is pretty much all the information that a beginner needs to know. As for the preliminaries, we will probably speak of that someday.
刚才那个问题是问法王子会不会带我们修加行，然后法王子说，现在还没有具体的计划，可能以后会有计划。现在目前的计划就是先讲完这个牟尼密显明论，然后我们当中有可能会跳一些比较难的部分，然后其他的还是会重点讲。然后法王子还想了还有很多其他的论点可以讲，比如说像入行论之类的。但是现在的话就是这一个牟尼密显明论是对于我们初学者来说是最适合的，然后都能够明白。然后之后如果有机会的话，再考慮修加行。
If you're speaking about Vajrayana preliminary practices, then there are quite a lot to speak of. But if you just speak of general Buddhist preliminary practices, then there are the four thoughts such as the verity of attaining the human birth, and there's the thought of impermanence, there's the law of cause and effect, there's the thoughts of samsara. Those are preliminary thoughts that one should think of when practicing the Dharma, especially impermanence, because impermanence is the main motivating factor for one to practice the Dharma. It's the main inspiring factor, I guess you could say. So those are kind of like the preliminaries. We could go in more detail on that someday.
然后关于加行的话，也有就是密宗的加行，然后还有就是共同的加行，也就是四前行。然后四前行的话，就是人生难得，寿命无常，因果不虚和轮回过患。其中最重要的应该就是寿命无常了，因为寿命无常是应该是所有修行人的动力。然后这个是要我们经常思考的。然后其他4个加行也是我们平时要具体思考的。然后之后我们有机会的话，可以介绍4次加行。And there's one question that wonders, for the first time meeting and making offering to a Tibetan guru, what should one offer to this guru that can create more virtuous origination?
When one first meets one's guru.
Right, when one first meet a Tibetan guru, this question has specified.
Basically, anything that is of value, any object of value. In the past, if you could afford it, the masters would offer gold or silver, riches or brocade or jade, and even horses or mules and animals and the like. Basically, anything that is of value in this world. But the best kind of offering that one can offer to one's guru is by offering one's body, speech, and mind in service to the guru. That is the best offering, better than any of the valuable objects that one can offer to one's guru. Whether it be the first time or second time or any time, whenever one meets one's guru.
刚才那个问题就是问第一次拜见上师的话，应该供养什么比较殊胜的缘起？然后访问者说，就是任何我们能够支付得起有价值的东西的供养上师都是非常好的。比如说以前的话，就会供养上师金银珠宝、玉或者是马动物等等的话。供养上师，但是最好的供养就是我们把自己的身口意的3门供养给上师，然后这个供养是最殊胜的供养，然后不管是我们第一次见上师，还是之后的任何时候的供养上师我们的自己的身口意3门的话，是最殊胜的供养。
There are many kinds of offerings that one can make to one's guru, both actual objects and those made by imagination. You can imagine all of the riches of the world, even the places, the gardens, the hills, the rainbows, the sky, and the whole universe, whatever is good in the universe, and you're offering all of that to the guru. You can do imagination by that, and there's merit by doing that. And you can also offer your own personal belongings to the guru if you have any kind of valuable object that is good. I myself personally like to offer something that is beautiful, like flowers or maybe some fruits to the guru. But then, of course, as I mentioned earlier, the best is by offering one's body, speech, and mind.
然后刚刚就补充说到，这个供养的话，可以是真实的供养，也可以是易幻供养。就是比如说，我们可以真实供养的话，比如说我们可以供养自己的财物或者是供养一些就比如说像法王子喜欢供养漂亮的花或者是水果之类的。或者我们也可以易幻供养上师，比如说我们可以观想一个非常漂亮的花园或者是我们平时看到的非常漂亮的山河大地彩虹等等，都可以供养给上师。
So yes, as I was saying, when offering to the guru, you should offer to the guru so you yourself can attain some merit, so you yourself can accumulate merit. It's for your own sake. It's similar to when we offer like water to the Buddha or food, fruits to the Buddha statues or to the three jewels. You're not offering it to the Buddha because if you don't offer it to the Buddha, will starve of hunger and thirst. But you're rather offering it because by offering it, you will accumulate merit. That is the main purpose of making offerings. So that is how you should make offerings.
然后法王子说，其实我们供养的话是，我们自己会获得很多的功德，以及获得很多的资粮。比如说，我们给佛菩萨、上师供养水啊、花、瓜果等等的话，不是我们不供养上师的话，上师就会没有水喝，或者是没有食物吃，而是我们自己供养佛菩萨、供养上师的话，我们自己能够从中获得功德以及积累资粮。And there's another question that wonders, since Guru Rinpoche is the embodiment of all the Bodhisattvas from the past, the present, and to the future, so does his mantra, Om Ahom Panchaguru Brahma Siddha Hom, can be a replacement of other mantras of other Bodhisattvas? So, for example, if one wants to obtain wisdom, others will say you should recite mantras from Mantriya, but can he or she also recite mantras of Guru Rinpoche in replacement of that?
Yeah, it could work like that, but it's mainly how you see it, I guess you could say. For example, if you see Guru Rinpoche as the embodiment of the wisdom of all of the Buddhas, and then recite his mantra and have the trust and faith and believe that by reciting it you will receive the blessings, the wisdom blessings of all of the Buddhas, then you will receive the blessings. It's basically however you view it, I guess you could say. For example, if you see Guru Rinpoche as the embodiment of all of the Buddhas and pray to him, then you receive the blessings of all of the Buddhas together. So it's like that.
刚才那个问题是问，就是是否莲花生大师的咒语可以代替所有佛菩萨的咒语？然后法王子说，可以，就主要是看我们自己的见解是如何的，或者是说我们自己如何看待佛菩萨的咒语。就比如说我们自己心里认为莲花生大师是具有所有佛菩萨的功德，然后以及也具有智慧的话，那我们祈请莲花生大师，或者是念诵莲花生大师的咒语的话，确实是可以获得所有佛菩萨的智慧等等诸如此类的。
There's a saying that the Indian masters of the past, of the ancient Indian Buddhist masters, when they accomplished one deity or one Buddha, once they have accomplished that Buddha, or once they have received the blessings from that Buddha, they accomplished all of the Buddhas together by accomplishing one Buddha. They receive all of the blessings of the Buddhas, all the Buddhas, by practicing one Buddha. While Tibetans, they have so many Buddhas and they practice so many different Buddhas, and when they practice each Buddha separately, and in the end they have not accomplished any of the Buddhas, because they have many failed to recognize all the Buddhas to be in nature, in ultimate sense, all are the same. They're not different from each other. They're just different forms and different based on different sentient beings' needs. I mean, in the ultimate sense, they're not different. So if one can recognize whoever Buddha you like, especially like, or is your yidam or personal deity, meditational deity, to be the embodiment of all of the Buddhas, then you will receive the blessings of all of the Buddhas by praying to that one Buddha alone.
然后有一种说法的话，就是在印度的很多成就者说，就是修得一个佛菩萨的果位，或者是获得一个佛菩萨全部的智慧的话，就获得了所有佛菩萨的智慧及所有佛菩萨的功德。然后在藏地的话，就因为有很多很多不同的佛菩萨，然后修很多不同的佛菩萨的法门，然后最后一个佛菩萨的法门或者智慧都得不到，因为他们就不明白，就是所有佛菩萨都是一体的，功德以及智慧都是一样的，只不过是佛菩萨根据众生的需要，或者是根据众生的业力所不同的化现。所以就是我们如果明白所有的佛菩萨都是一体的话，那祈请任何一个佛菩萨就都是一样的。And there's another question that wonders, due to one's finance or other reasons, one can only place the Buddha statue in one's bedroom right now. And is there anything wrong or non-virtuous about that?
It's best if one can have a separate room. Yes, if one does have space, but if one does not have a space and one wishes to have the Buddha in one's house, but the only place you can put it is in your room, then at least try to put it up at a higher place in one's room. not at any kind of low place. And also at that higher place, keep it clean as much as you can.
然后刚才那个问题是问，就是佛菩萨放在卧室的话，会不会有什么不恭敬的地方？然后法王子说，最好的话可以放在其他的地方，但是如果只能放在卧室的话，就要放在高的地方，然后要保持那个地方的清净。And there's another question that since there's a lot of requests for oral transmission from you, and so one wonders if there's any plan for you in the future to come to the Han region for teaching in the future.
Yes, I do hope to. It's difficult right now because I'm still in college, but yes, in several years' time, I do hope to make a visit there.
刚才那个问题是问，就是很多人请法王子口传的法王子有没有来汉地的打算？然后法王子说他确实是希望来汉地，但是因为他现在还在学习当中，然后所以以后还是希望有机会还是可以来汉地。And there's another question that wonders, what are some of the negative effects, or what are something that one should be aware of if one has a pet, or sorry, if a Buddhist practitioner owns a pet?
What is the negative effects if one has a pet?
Right, for a Buddhist practitioner.
This practitioner, I don't think there is a negative effect, generally speaking. As a Buddhist practitioner, you do have a chance to take care of sentient beings. Of course, we say our mission is to take care of all sentient beings, to help all sentient beings. So, of course, that pet should be included in that all sentient beings. So, and since the pet is living with you, you have the chance to take care of it and bestow kindness upon it. But yeah, if you're a Buddhist practitioner and if you do not feed the pet well, if you do not treat the pet well, then of course there are negative results. Yeah.
刚刚那个问题就是问如果养宠就佛弟子养宠有什么弊端的话，法王子说就是没有很大的弊端，因为就是我们修行就是要为了帮助众生，然后我们养的宠也是众生之一。当然，如果我们没有好好的照顾我们的宠，比如说没有照顾好他们，没有给他们喂东西吃的话呢，可能就会有弊端。但是其他的话，因为他们是众生之一，所以也没有其他的弊端。
When one has a pet, I think as a Buddhist practitioner, something important that one can do is that to try to understand whenever one sees one's pet, try to understand that just as oneself wishes for happiness and does not wish to suffer, likewise that pet also is a living sentient being. It has a mind, it has feelings, it wishes to have happiness, wishes to be happy, it does not wish to suffer. It may not be as smart as we humans are. However, it has emotions and feelings, and it is a living sentient being, and it needs to be respected due to that. And so yeah, try to understand that, and then if you can, then that is very good.
然后法王子还补充说到，就是我们看见我们自己的宠物的时候，就要思维，就是我们自己不希望我们自己的我们自己不希望自己受苦。那同样对于我们自己的宠物来说，他们也不希望受苦，所以就是可能他们不如我们人聪明，但是他们也是不希望受到痛苦，所以就是我们在看到自己的宠物的时候，也可以做如是的观想。And one wonders if one has taken the refuge to the three jewels, what are some of the conditions that one might break the precepts of taking the refuge of the three jewels?
That will be mentioned later on in the clarifying the sage's intent in great detail. So maybe we can learn about that then.
刚才的问题是问，就是皈依之后有什么情况下会破戒？然后法王子说，我们之后这个学习的牟尼密显明论当中会仔细的说到。And also one wonders if one has, say, a Buddhist picture or a Buddhist statue and one makes offering to it without it having been blessed by a guru or by a Rinpoche before, will there be any non-virtuous ordination if one started to make offering to a statue that hasn't received blessing before?
Well, if it has been consecrated by a teacher, then that is most excellent. There's the blessings when the teacher consecrates the image of the Buddha, whether it be a picture or a statue, or a painting, a scroll. During the consecration, the Guru invites the Buddha's mind to enter into that statue and to reside there and to bestow blessings upon sentient beings. So that is the best if it has been consecrated. If it has not been consecrated, it should still be respected, basically because it represents the Buddha. It represents the Buddha. We say that any kind of image of the Buddha always should be respected, even if whether it's a gold Buddha, a statue made of gold, or even if it's a statue made of dirt, Buddha statue made of dirt, it should be equally respected as a Buddha. So therefore, yes, it is worth still making offerings to the Buddha statue, even if it has not been consecrated.
刚才就是问，如果佛菩萨就是佛像没有皈依的话，不是，对不起，佛像没有开光的话，这供奉会不会有不好的缘起或者不是很吉祥？然后房子说，就是最好的当然是有上师能够为佛菩萨佛像做开光，这样的话就是可以请佛菩萨的智慧能够入住到我们拥有的这个佛像，或者是这个佛像，或者是我们的佛菩萨的照片也好等等。但是但是如果就算没有开光的话，就不管是由金子做的还是由银做的，或者是用土做的佛像的话，都应该就是被供奉起来，因为他们都是佛的象征，都是代表佛，所以都还是应该，就算没有开光的话，也应该供养起来。
So we have inserted some additional prayers this time. So this one, the outer, inner, and secret refuge practice of the Master Tandong Gyalpo revealed, I think it should be revealed by Gangapa Baljo Shirap. So this prayer it is said to contain the blessings of Avalokiteshvara. It was passed from Avalokiteshvara to a master called Gangapa Baljo Shirap. And then Gangapa Baljo Shirap passed it to Master Tandong Gyalpo, who is one of the great Tibetan Buddhist saint. And this prayer, this refuge prayer, is said to eliminate any kind of obscurations or sicknesses and the like. And after this, we will recite the Mani mantra, the mantra of Jeresik, several times. And after that, we will recite the prayer that saved Sakya from sickness that was said by Master Tandong Gyalpo.
然后我们今天的课后念诵又加了新的不同的念诵，然后这一个就是这个外内密皈依修法的话，是由观世音菩萨所传下来，然后是由观世音菩萨的加持，然后传给就是屏幕上显示的这个大成就者唐东加波，然后这个是专门用来就是遣除违缘、遣除障碍的。然后之后我们还有加了其他的念诵，就比如说包括就是萨迦派的，就是遣除疫情的一些或者是遣除一些违愿的一些念诵。
So the story behind the prayer that saved Sakya from sickness is that at one point during the time of when Tandong Gyalpo was living, the Sakya monastery and basically the Sakya town itself in Tibet, all of the people contracted a sickness, kind of like an epidemic there at that time. And whatever kind of prayers, rituals that the masters there did, it did not really have any effect to annihilate the sickness, the disease. But then Master Tandong Gyalpo happened to visit Sakya right at that time. And when he visited there, he recited that outer, inner, and secret refuge prayer that I mentioned first, and he also recited the Mani mantra several times, and then he recited this prayer. And after this prayer, after he recited this prayer and did all of those prayers together, then the sickness naturally faded from Sakya, and all of the people of Sakya were happy. So that is the history behind this. And so therefore, just like he recited in the same kind of order that he recited these prayers, we will first recite the refuge prayer, and then we will recite the Mani mantra, and then we will recite the prayer that saved Sakya from sickness.
然后我们要念诵的这个的，就是这个仪轨的或者是说这个念诵的背后的故事，就是在以前的话，在萨迦寺就是有一个疫情的一个传播，然后，就是不管是就好像屏幕上显示的这个样，就是不管是做任何的，就佛事也好，都没有任何的作用。然后唐唐加波来了之后，就是为了这个做法，就先念了皈依仪轨，就是我们之后会念的，然后再念了观音心咒，然后再念了这个祈请文，然后之后这个疫情就很快的就平息下来。所以我们待会儿的话也是根据这个顺序来念诵。
And after this, we have also added the swift rebirth prayer for His Holiness Jigta Tachir Rinpoche, who is my grandfather and guru, and who passed away several years ago, back in 2016. And this was composed by His Holiness the 41st Sakya Teacher Rinpoche. Then, so we will recite this, and then same as usual, the long life prayer for His Holiness the 41st Sakya Teacher Rinpoche, and then the dedication prayers.
然后接下来的话，我们会念，我们会念这个达钦法王的祈请文。然后，达钦法王是法王子的，是法王子的外公，然后也是法王子的上身，在16年圆寂的。然后，之后的话，我们会像以前一样念诵第41任法王的长寿祈请文，然后之后再念回向仪轨。
We will start now.
现在开始念诵。
Ma namka da nyambe semje tamje lama sangye rinpo che la gyabsu che wu sangye che da gendye namla gyabsu che wu lama yedam kanje tsola gyabsu che wu rangsem donsa che ge gula gyabsu che wu Ma namka da nyambe semje tamje lama sangye rinpo che la gyabsu che wu sangye che da ginde namla gyabsu che wu lama yedam kanje tsola gyabsu che wu rangsem donsa che ge gula gyabsu che wu Ma namka dang nyambe semje tamje lama sangye rinpo che la gyabsu che wu sangye che dang gendye namla gyabsu che wu lama yedam kanje tsola gyabsu che wu rangsem donsa che ge gula gyabsu che wu O mani beme hu, mani beme hu, o mani beme hu, mani beme hu, o mani beme hu, o mani beme hu, o mani beme hu, mani beme hu, mani beme hu, mani beme hu, mani beme hu. Omani beme, 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 Vedan loburu kele gyurba ye dedan nedan jumbe tseba so semje yime deve nenam gun jide kamso jungwara ma gyuru jing chidara sheme chibe seja shin geje jila lusem changchebe socho nege dunga chi nye ba jide kamso jungwara ma gyuru jing cheda shinje kanang chuba dar nege mingzam tebe zhachebe nije bada dabe rimso gi lujin gunla nebara ma gyuru jing Nebe giri dongcha gechu dang, lobru yecho sumgya chuchu dang, shikya zashi nela soba yi, lujin gunla tsewara ma gyuru jing, lusem dewa ma li choche be, jungshi chube dungala chi nye ba, ma lu shi dang do den ba dang, Tsirin me deki denpala shu. Lama genjo sumge tuje dang. Kanzhi chegyong sume nitu dang. Nenje luwa mebe dendo gi. Mo melam dabze drupala shu. Lama yidam sangye chansem so gyab yu ramjam gyatse choje la zeje dongwe yangye solde na yila membe twende nyudru ze kera ngage wangbe yarnge da gune kawa duja gawe Sanam Baldo Chimba Laye Ring Dachin Jigda Shabla Sova Dem Yiri Jigdo Degan Gyume Kar Kasang Jidi Gurwa Motsara Su Mije Jigde Kamgi Rolba Le Deme Shuba Dini Ji Tsu Tena lari dagara zangma la kenze nube wegara ze sumne zeje tenbe gumi gyongke ba kundong shunu laryang yuche so zagi lama namgi chin lam dang nanjo ringa jube dendo ki tenbe ngada bade sakya be Nusan gele chojur kyab gyoro chi. Bade zawe lama rinpo che. Dagi chivuro peme denshu ne. Gajin chenpe gone jesun de. Kuson toge meju zado so. Chi me mi she son we kuru kana chi me tse jen la mo jen de ma chi me tse la wang we so nang gi chi me tse ye nge zhu za du su re suan be me tu gi la lam ne ken ze nu tu rang su ye mo che sa de long do be chang ye ze ne du jia ling xie ge du da de so ma wang yu zhu la ri kun ye dong zhou ge ga ze te jie do nga la pian de ba du ba la we jin le jie san pe wang ye yang bu Sha de so nam da chim de se ge sa xie la te sang gong be rin chim
多忙在且这中当界的忙人给叫着人往了不得说送要往你把节尊空忙你叫的这对年给才马些叫别啷上啥么落些难叫我去心的在Shabden so Pinzoi kya se du ye cha xie ba ba de sa ke chu se ba ba la ne cho zam ne ze be gen du chun chun xie sang song do ro je da de so lu me la ma cho so tu je dang ye dang de song kya so tu do dang chu nie sa mo gyur me den be tu chi da so we de ju gyur chi se nam de ye tang je se ba ye to me ye be zha na pam je ne ga na che ba lon chu ba ye se de so le zhuo wa shu jiang ba ba wu qie de lai qian ba tai gun du sang bu te yang te xin de te dai gun ge jie su da lu jing ge wa de da tam jie ra du som xie bei jia wa tam jie ge wo wa kan na chuo du ma ba de da ge wei zao wa de Kyan sambo che che ra do mo wa gi chang choi gyo wei gyo ba cho gyo ai ke zhu gya ci yong su kan wei ne kan re che de ten ba sa zi ba sa kya ba ye den ba ge guru ji ka chen pe ge de wa do ji de ba de sa ge che se ba guru ji zhu be dong ge gun che me ba dai gun gyang che de Nam ka nyam ba la sho. Thank you.
Thank you, Rinpoche.
Thank you. So 2 weeks later, our next class, I believe it coincides with the Labab Tujin, which is the descent of the Buddha from heaven after he taught his mother the Abhidharma for several months there. So it marks the day when he descended, when he returned back to earth to continue to guide beings. So on that day, we will, an additional prayer will be added, the butter lamp offering prayer, composed by His Holiness the 41st Sakura Teacher Rinpoche. So if you have any kind of light, if it's a butter lamp or electronic lamp, if you can have it there, then that would be great.
我们下一次的课程的话，正好是天降日的那一天，然后天降日就是佛陀为母亲说法之后再回到人间的日子，然后那天的话我们会额外的念诵一个41世萨迦法王的就是写的一个仪轨，然后那天我们如果师兄们有灯的话，不管是电子的灯还是酥油灯的话，能够供养的话都请准备好，感谢各位师兄。
Thank you. See you 2 weeks later.
Thank you, Rinpoche.
我们2周之后见。Thank you, Rinpoche.